Hello everyone, amateur meteorologist. First and weather here. It is November 24th, 2020, and we sure have a lot to talk about as we head into the first week or so of December and end the month of November. As you saw in my final winter forecast, which I uploaded or the day before yesterday, I was mentioning that the first week or couple weeks of December does look quite active and stormy potentially for the East Coast, and definitely colder than average for at least the first 6 to 10 days. And so right now, on the top right here, we have the EPS model, and then on the bottom we have the GEFS or GFS ensemble. And those are basically both long-range ensemble models. And this is going to be just a look at what both models are showing. And so if we go through time, you can see we have right now originating over the eastern part of the country, so quite mild and warm. We're going to have a cold front come through essentially on Thanksgiving Day. That ridge sort of departs. And then after that, we have another bit of a ridge. But what I want you to notice is you have a substantial positive P&A block starting to form. Let me go back right here. So that's the first sign of something sort of trying to change. And then this is the last day of November, November 30th. And you have two systems right here that are going to try to phase. This is from the polar jet stream. This is from the subtropical jet stream. And if you notice, what they do is it turns into a very potent trough over the eastern part of the country, right over Kentucky. And these are some very below average heights. And so that would mean very windy, very cold conditions on the backside of that storm or that trough, and a nice round of some pretty intense weather that could come through with this extreme pressure gradient. We could be even talking some severe storms potentially in some areas if that trough has a particularly negative tilted axis. And after that goes through, we see this sort of pattern take place with an extremely positive P&A. Look at that, 3 standard deviations above the average, almost. And then a wide area of troughing or below average heights and a very active subtropical jet stream over the southeast and mid-Atlantic. And this is a pattern you typically see in El Nino winter. This is not really something you see in a La Nina. But again, you can of course have variation, and there has been La Ninas do typically have colder Decembers with front-loaded winters, where you have the greatest opportunity for snow and cold in the first part of winter. And with that very active hurricane season, that is what we in fact that is in fact a correlation with the higher the activity and ACE levels of a hurricane season. The greater the tendency for December to be cooler than average. And that is certainly what we're seeing here, potentially developing. And as we go past in time, this is December 3rd, you can see, again, very strong P&A, positive P&A, negative EPO, and a bit of a block trying to form. You can see this very distinct horseshoe shape sort of going all over Canada. And whenever you see that, that's indicative of a very stormy pattern over the eastern part of the country, especially the mid-Atlantic and northeast. And also the Ohio Valley. And then as we move through time, again, that area of below average heights just remains in place for the southeast, and that just continues. In fact, the ensemble support even grows for more troughing and a greater magnitude of below average heights. And this far out, that is certainly impressive. This is December 7th, and to see such strong below average heights being showed by the ensembles is definitely very impressive. And if we compare both models, this right here on the bottom is the GFS ensemble, and then we move up right here, this is the European. Very similar. In fact, the European is even having a stronger positive P&A, a more poleward ridge, making that trough a bit stronger than what the GFS has. And as you go through time, this is our 342, this is the European, this is the GFS, almost identical. There's very good ensemble agreement that we're going to be seeing a positive P&A right here, negative EPO, right, and then some sort of cross-country Canadian extensive block that forms, and this will sort of act like a negative NAO. With that blocking all across Canada, that will allow that colder air to spill down into the southern U.S., especially east of the Rockies, and particularly in the southeast and mid-Atlantic. So very unusual to see model agreement with this much accuracy, or excuse me, with models that are in this much of agreement. And then this is the GFS, which goes out to hour 384, continuing that forecast all the way till the 10th of December. You can see a nice split flow right here, sort of phasing down here. And one thing I want to point out is many people are in the weather community are getting very excited that this is going to be, oh wow, look at this, snowstorm after snowstorm for the eastern part of the country. But I do want to stress that that snowstorm risk is all going to depend on whether we actually see pretty good blocking with a negative NAO, and that phasing happening before it reaches the before it reaches the Mid Atlantic. Because right here you could have big snows in the Mid Atlantic, in the Ohio Valley, interior Northeast, and that right now is just not certain. All I can tell you guys right now is that the eastern part of the country is likely going to be cold, and it's likely going to be stormy for the first week of December. Whether that will be snow or rain is more uncertain. There's a lot of things that have to go perfect in order to see a good snowstorm for the Mid-Atlantic. But we are pretty sure right now that it's going to be very cold for a couple of days, high temperatures, 10, maybe even 15 degrees below average on a couple of days, and wet. Because with this trough right here, this active subtropical jet stream, which is not something you typically see in a La Nina winter, it's pieces of energy are going to be just coming right after each other and swinging right across the southeast, and that will keep things very wet. Now, switching to the 2-meter temperature anomaly on the EPS, you can see as we go through time, we're quite warm on Thanksgiving Day. That should help. That should a lot of help, or make it easier for many people to dine outside and just stay safe. But after that, we have, in general, warmer than average conditions. But what you see what happens after November 30th, we get that big sort of phasing going on right here. And that's going to cause temperatures to be very cool, about 5 to 10 degrees below average in the southeast. And then after that, that trough essentially moves and swings to the east. And you can see what's really interesting right here is that the extent of the cold is focused in the southeast, not coming in from the Midwest. And what I also want to point out is look at these unbelievable, off the charts temperature anomalies in Canada, and that's because of that very strong positive PNA. This PNA could really rival some of the strongest standard deviation PNAs we've seen in a while, and you can see that causes that air from Canada to come pouring down into here and allow those cooler conditions. And this trend continues. Again, this is December 6th, still staying below average in the southeast. This is not just a quick glancing blow of cold air. Rather, it is a sustained pattern of cooler conditions in the southeast. And then as we go through the end of time, hour 360, that pattern is still in place. Cold in the southeast and up very warm in the northern portion of the country, and especially Canada, as that big positive PNA ridge just sticks in place right here. Now, I want to look at the upper level winds at 200 millibars. This can give you a good idea of what the subtropical jet stream is doing and what areas are more likely to see above average precip and just in general storminess. So I'm going to jump past November 30th. This is December 1st. You can see a very strong subtropical jet. You have lots of rising velocity potentials here, indicating lots of lift. And so if a storm was to form, if a piece of energy was to develop, you can see that storm track is essentially right along and to the south of the Mid-Atlantic. And this essentially would promote storm systems to go to the south and right up the coast or go inland. So that's the thing we just don't know right now. What we know for certain is it's going to be very wet and very active over the Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast. Rain or snow, we don't know yet, but there is the potential for some wintry weather in the eastern half of the country. And what I also want you to notice is that split flow. This is not something you typically see for this type of sea surface temperature setup we're seeing this winter. You can see that big positive PNA, that subtropical jet splitting off, and you have those very above average or rising velocity potentials right here. And this is what you want to see if you like winter. If you like cold and snow for the eastern part of the country, this is what you want to see as we head into winter. And you can see as we go to the end of this ensemble run, hour 360, that pattern is still in place. We still have the split flow, we still have the positive PNA, the active subtropical jet, and the storm track, which would favor systems to go along the eastern coast, which would be favorable for snow lovers. Again, it's too early to say whether this will actually happen, but right now it does look like things could be turning quite wintry somewhere east of the Mississippi. Now, I want to take a look at the European high-res model just to give you a good idea of what's going on with the actual precip and surface level. And so let's go to November 30th. You can see right here this big system, this big trough coming in, which will really cause a big, strong cold front to come through with huge gradients and a lot of wind, especially on the backside as that strong high pressure moves in. So very windy and also a big severe weather threat for some areas with that strong gradient. And as that moves through, again, you can see pretty impressive winds in the Midwest and even into the Southeast and also ahead of it. And then we have that big upper level low right here that spins out. And then after that, you have another system coming in that actually takes an Appalachian track. So what's important to know is that even though the ensembles are showing this ideal track for a snowstorm in the mid-Atlantic and interior or coastal sections of the Northeast, that's because those models are averaged out. You have a bunch of members coming in, and the mean of that is what's projected. So what might actually be happening 240 hours from now is very different. That's why when people are saying that the East Coast is guaranteed a snowstorm in the first week of December, that's just not the case because those are the ensembles. You can see the European, which has been outperforming the GFS in every way over the past few days, does not show that classic eastern mid-Atlantic snowstorm look. Rather, it takes the Appalachian track with snow on the backside, indicating favorable conditions for the Ohio Valley region. So again, a lot of stuff is uncertain, but what we do know for now is that it's going to be wet in this area right here and cold for at least the first 10 days of December. Now, looking at the MJO, you can see that we're currently in about phase 3 or 4, but the MJO has collapsed on itself, so we're essentially in null phase right now. However, as we go through time, as we enter the 1st of December, we sort of enter that phase 5 and 6 category, and then as we go through time, by December 9th, we're firmly in phase 6, and then after that, we trend to phase 7. Now, what are the correlations between phase 6 in December? Well, what you typically see is, as if we go through November, December, January, you can see phase 6 is quite warm, but phase 7 is actually kind of cool. So let me go to that real quick. So you can see right here, while phase 6 is kind of warm, you can see the MJO trying to go into phase 7 as we go into the latter portions of the month. And that, of course, is again indicative of some pattern changes going on, and that's what we're seeing around the first week of December, a pretty sudden pattern change, and that is potentially in part due to the MJO. Now I want to look at the teleconnections of the European ensemble model. This gives you a good idea of what's going on in the atmosphere and how that will affect the weather in the lower 48. So this is the Arctic Oscillation, which has been quite positive, but it's expected to trend negative as we go into the first week of December. Not too negative. Remember, this is an ensemble spread, but you can see it's definitely better than what we have right now, trending to neutral and even negative as we head into the first week of December. Same picture with the EPO, which has actually been a little bit positive right now, which is not good, trending negative for one day or so, but then going back positive. But you can see that once we hit the first week of December, we do once again go back to neutral to maybe even negative once we reach the 5th or 6th, which is again favorable for troughing in the east. Here's the NAO, which again, very positive right now. But once we reach the first part of December, trending negative to going neutral, which again helps support cooler weather in the eastern part of the country. And then finally, the biggest one, the PNA, is just going to skyrocket very, very high. This is very unusual. To see a PNA event this strong. It's been quite a few years until we've seen, or it's certainly been quite a few years since we've seen a PNA event that's forecast to be this strong. And there's a lot of support in both the GFS and European. So I think the main driver with this entire pattern will just be the pure strength of this very poleward P&A ridge that forms in the western part of the country, which will really help to sort of bring down that cooler Canadian air into the lower 48. And you can see the ensemble here keeps the P&A very positive until at least the 10th of December. So this cooler pattern for the east is looking likely to last at least about 10 to 15 days the way it looks right now. Now, finally, I want to look at the polar vortex because this is very important when looking at what's going to happen maybe after this pattern goes away. Because as you know, with La Nina winters, you typically do see a cooler December where the winter is mostly front-loaded. But when you go after December, that's when you have to have the polar vortex that can be a wild card factor. And so if we look at the GFS forecast right now, you can see that the polar vortex is very strong. But as you go through time, it does appear to become a little stretched. This is especially as we head to the end of November. But what I want to point out is after that, the polar vortex does look to sort of rotate and get its act back together. Right here, it does get a little bit displaced and stretched just a bit. But so far, there is not really any positive signs for this to weaken. However, what I do want to point out is right now the polar vortex is sort of this donut shape like this, right? But by the time we reach the end of the track, it's more elongated, sort of like a sphere, or not a sphere, but you're holding a piece of Play-Doh and you're stretching it out. And so while the GFS is not really showing any sudden displacement or weakening, it is indicating quite a bit of stretching, and that would then impact the winter down the road. So while we have that pattern change right now that's expected to form in the first part of December, that pattern is only going to last about 2 to 3 weeks at most. So if the polar vortex then can become stretched and elongated, that would then support those cooler trends staying for much longer. Of course, this is going to be fighting the westerly KBO and all the other factors that will go against this, but if this can verify, that would definitely mean some changes to my winter forecast for this year. Again, it's a big if. But if it does, if the polar vortex does begin to become stretched and elongated, we would be talking about some changes to the winter forecast for January. And so I'll keep you guys posted on that. But as of now, the key takeaway from this video is that Thanksgiving should be nice on the East Coast after a few morning showers, quite mild. And then around November 30th or December 1st, we're going to start to see a pattern change with cooler weather, cold even, for the southeast and mid-Atlantic and also northeast, and very stormy and wet and potentially wintry conditions for areas east of the Mississippi for the first part of December. So stay safe, guys. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.